and welcome to the Happier Marriage Podcast, a podcast for spouses longing to have a happier marriage so they can feel more connected, desired, and supported. Now, to start the show, here is your host and Sherpa, licensed marriage and family therapist and certified relationship coach, Kingsley Grant.
Thanks for joining me on the Happier Marriage Secrets Podcast, the podcast where we share insights, practical tips, and strategic actions for the Christian professional spouse who is looking to strengthen their intimacy and deepen their connection with their partner and ultimately have a God-honoring and happier marriage. This is episode 47, and I have another powerful episode for you. This episode is entitled, Learn How to Compromise with Your Spouse Without Losing Yourself. Isn't that what you want to be able to do? Because the very term, the word compromise, almost sounds like you're going to have to give something up, right? So we'll be discussing the art of compromise, which I believe is an essential component of effective communication in marriage. It is not one of those things that ought to be overlooked or somehow sidestepped because it is essential. However, some people may not find it that way. Now, as I mentioned, the word compromise can have a negative overtone, right? But I want you to think of it in the sense of negotiation. So when you hear me use the word compromise, I want you to be thinking that I'm talking about negotiation, right? I want you to have that in your mind as we go through this so you can maintain the positive nature of this word compromise. Here's what I believe. Compromise is a key to resolving and achieving common goals, resolving conflicts and achieving common goals in your marriage. Because by compromising, you are going to be able to better understand your partner's needs. You're also going to be able to work together towards a common goal. And in the end, find solutions that I believe will be mutually or should be mutually beneficial. Now, some people may disagree with me on that, but I hope you're not one of those people because they may disagree for reasons like this. I'm going to share 3 reasons why some people may disagree with what I just said. And the first one might be, I shouldn't have to compromise if my spouse loves me enough to give me what I want. Now I get it. It's understandable to feel like your spouse, your partner should give you everything you want if they truly love you. Isn't that what might be some people's thought process, maybe yours? However, what I find in working with so many couples throughout the years in marriage, compromise is an essential part of communication. And working together as a team is not a single person sport. Marriage is not a single person sport. It is a team sport. It's important to understand that compromise doesn't mean giving up everything you want, but it is finding what I would say is that middle ground, right? That place where both of you don't get all that you want, but the relationship get all that it needs. That middle ground, right? That works for both of you. And it's finding a solution that both of you can be satisfied with. It meets your needs and allows you to feel heard and respected. So I can get it when you say, I shouldn't have to compromise if my spouse loves me enough to give me what I want. And that is what some people may say, well, why should I even have to compromise? Because if he loves me the way that he said he does, or she loved me the way that she said she does, then why do I need to compromise? I should get what I want, right? Second thing that I may hear is compromise means giving up something I want. And, I don't want to do that. I don't want to give up something that I really want. Now, it can feel sometimes like you're giving up something that you want. It feels that way. I know I've been married almost 4 decades, and I tell you, at times it does feel that way. But isn't that what marriage is all about too? Is about sacrificing. Sometimes it's what the Bible says, give honor to the other person or put the other person first? Isn't that what it teaches? So compromise should feel that way when you truly have to compromise on something, but it's not giving up your ideals or your conviction, right? And I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. It's a partnership you're in. You're not in a competition, right? You're in a partnership, not a competition. And some people feels, or some relationships or marriage feels like you're competing, right? It's almost like who will have the last word, or whose idea will, quote, win out, unquote. And it feels competitive. And that's what a marriage should not be that way. So when you're able to compromise, you're showing your spouse that their needs and wants are just as important as yours. And when he or she feels that way, it's going to make a difference, right? It's important to approach this, your situation, your issues with compromise, with a positive attitude. So you have to go into this with the right kind of attitude. So if you're feeling that compromise means giving up something that you want and you don't want to do that, well, maybe you don't understand fully what marriage is all about, right? It's a partnership, not a competition. It's not a single person sport. It's a team sport, right? And remember, compromising is not about losing, but it's really finding a solution that works for the marriage. And the third thing why a person may, when they hear the idea of compromise, may not want to agree with me, will say, my spouse, my partner never wants to compromise. So why should I bother trying? Because it's almost like it's his way or her way or the highway. So why should I even try to compromise when he or she doesn't? Now, I know it feels frustrating when you feel like your partner never wants to compromise. And, when I hear the word never, I always a red flag goes off in my head, because there's never truly a never, right? It may feel like most of the times, but anyway, that's a whole different topic, and I don't want to get off in that tangent. It's important, though, that you're going to lead by example. I love what the Bible says. It says, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. And I love this, the passage of scripture where it talked about Peter interaction with Jesus. And you may remember this story if you have been any time listening to the Bible or reading the Bible. But there's a time where Peter was asking Jesus about John. He said, "What about John?" And Jesus said, "Leave that to me." In essence, Peter, worry about yourself. Lead yourself. You do what you know you're supposed to do. And so when you're saying your spouse never wants to compromise, why should you bother trying? Listen, I hope you listen to my episode 46, because I really kind of drill down sometimes about this in that episode about leadership and why you may want to take the initiative in certain things. See, when you're able to find a solution, because that's what you're focused on, and works that works for both of you, your spouse may feel more likely to see the value in compromising and be willing to compromise in the future. So you could lead by example. You could be the shining light. You could be the one that doesn't, kind of stoop low because he doesn't. It's almost like this quid pro quo type of thing. If he does, then I do, right? It's tit for tat. That's not how marriage works. And if you've been at this for any period of time, that this is not going to end well if it's all about what he does and what I do. And it's almost like if he doesn't, then I don't, and so on. That is not a way that we should live. As a matter of fact, when Jesus taught about relationships, he said, you lead. If someone does something to you that is evil or is wrong, don't do likewise. Rise above that. Overcome evil by doing good. So if you think your partner is doing evil by not wanting to work on the relationship and compromise, then if you're going to not try and do what he or she does, then you're doing an evil thing in return. You overcome evil by doing good, not the other way around. Okay? Now, so let's see why then it's important to learn how to compromise with your spouse without losing yourself. Now, while at the same time, I want to explore some of these objections in this episode. Now, here's some of the benefits I believe that why you may want to learn how to compromise. And the first thing I want to mention is this. You would notice that when you're compromising the right way, there becomes an increased understanding. So your understanding and the empathy between you both will be on the rise, right? And isn't that what you want? Don't you want to feel like you're better understood by your spouse and you're understanding him or her better? Yes, I'm sure you do. So when you're able to begin this idea of learn how to compromise with your spouse, you're really saying, I'm opening up to have a better understanding in my relationship, to have more empathy between us. And you're hoping that your partner can see things as you want to see things from the other person's perspective. That's empathy. So if that's what your goal is, if you want to see an increase in understanding in your relationship and an increase in empathy, then this is one of the reasons why you want to learn how to compromise with your partner. Number two, you want to learn how to compromise with your partner without giving up, without losing yourself, because what it does, it creates a greater harmony and cooperation in the marriage. So what compromise does, it gives room, or it says fosters greater harmony. It opens up for you to feel like you're in this together. You feel like you're harmoniously pulling together, right? You feel like you're on the same page, and there's more cooperation that's taking place in your marriage as you're both working to get together to find mutually, as I mentioned earlier, mutually agreeable solutions, outcomes. So if you want a greater harmony and cooperation in your marriage, then you may want to really give place to learning how to compromise with your partner without losing yourself. And the third reason why I believe it's a benefit for you is it allows you to improve your problem-solving skills, which is, by the way, portable. You take that with you in any relationship context you find yourself. So it not only improve your skill set in problem solving, but also in reducing conflict, because you're going to have less conflict because you're learning how to problem solve. You're learning how to come together and mutually work for a desirable outcome that's beneficial for you and the relationship. So you find solutions that work for both of you. So my question then to you is this: isn't that something that is worth making a compromise or working to compromise or negotiate for? Increased understanding and empathy, greater harmony and cooperation, learning how to improve your problem-solving skills and reducing conflict. Wouldn't that be a good thing? I think it would be. I think you would agree that's a good thing, right? Now, I want to share with you a story of this couple that we mentioned in the last episode. I hope you've listened to episode 46, because I introduced to you Sarah and John, and I'll be using Sarah and John quite a bit in future episodes, because I think we can use Sarah and John as a fictitious couple, but they represent so many couples that I've worked with, and you might in somehow resonate with the story of Sarah and John. So here's what happened, the story as it unfolds. Sarah and John, they're a Christian couple and have been married for 7 years and have two children. Now, they often have disagreements about how to spend their money. Now, let me say, Christians are not immune from conflict or challenges. And in this area of money, they also can have their challenges as well. I've worked with so many who have demonstrated that this is an area that they struggle with. It's challenging for them for many reasons. So they often have disagreements about money. Now, Sarah is a saver, while John, guess what, is a spender. It's opposite attract. Isn't that so, right? Sarah is a saver, while John is a spender. The difference in spending habits has caused tension in their marriage, leading to arguments and frustration. Now, so one day Sarah had this brilliant idea, and she suggested to John that they start a budget to help manage their finances. Sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Well, not so much to John. John objected because he said it felt like it was too restrictive and too controlling. So he interpreted her idea as one that wants to place restriction on him and to control him. Now, Sarah thinks that John doesn't care about their financial future because he objected, while John thinks that Sarah is too rigid and inflexible. Now, that's a story, and I'm going to unpack it. But I want to, before we do that, is share with you 3 questions I want you to ponder as we go through this episode. The question is this: is John correct that this is a control issue? Is he correct that it's a control issue? The second question: what beliefs do you hear and do you see at play? What beliefs are you seeing and hearing at play, both from John and Sarah? And number 3, third question is: how could John and Sarah solve this problem through compromise? Now, I'm going to teach you in a few moments 3 important ways of how to compromise with your spouse without losing yourself. And so this third question, how John and Sarah could solve this problem through compromise, you probably will have a better answer once I've gone through the 3 most important ways on how to compromise with your spouse without losing yourself. Now, before I share with you these 3 ways, I'm going to ask you to do what I call a spousal honor, meaning doing something to show your appreciation for getting such value, incredible value from each episode. And here's the good news. It's all for free. So the spousal honor is that gentleman honor. It's taking a few minutes to leave a rating and a review on the platform on which you're listening to this podcast. Actually, I prefer to do it on Apple Podcasts. And I'm going to tell you, if you just kind of hang in there with me, because I believe this is the least you can do in return. And I hope you'll agree with that. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of how to do that on your phone at the end of this episode. So please listen to the very end. It will take you much less, less time than you're thinking it will take you to do that. And I'm going to walk you through that very, very quickly on how you can do that. Now, to ensure that you don't miss any episodes, make sure you subscribe to the show as well on the platform to which you're listening. And if you've missed past episodes, for example, episode 46 or other episodes, I want to encourage you to go to happiermarriagesecrets.com, happiermarriagesecrets.com/podcast, and you'll see all the past episodes that you can have at your heart's content, and you can binge listen as much as you want right there. Now, if this is the first time you're listening to me, let me say this. Thank you for joining us, number 1. And number 2, you may or may not agree with all that you'll hear. And quite frankly, I don't expect you to, because you are a person that thinks for yourself. You have a mind and a brain that God's given you. But I believe that I'm going to share an angle that you may not think about, and why I think I bring value to you, because I've been doing this for a very long time, working with so many couples, hundreds of couples over the years, and have been married almost 4 decades. So I believe I can bring something to you of great value that you may not have thought about or have heard about. And you'll find out that I can be a contrarian sometimes, right? Meaning that I can come at an angle that really stir things up. And that's one of the reasons I had this podcast, is to stir things up. But one thing I guarantee you is that I'll take you in for a safe landing, a solid landing. And you can always share your thoughts through commenting or send an email, which you'll hear more of at the end. Now, this show is brought to you by KingsleyGrant.com. Yes, KingsleyGrant.com. And the hope of KingsleyGrant.com is that you will be challenged in your life, inspired and encouraged by listening to this episode, but also by actually accessing resources you can find on KingsleyGrant.com, so you can make sure you do that. Now, as we get ready to dive into this episode today, I want you to mark those, and I have the links in the show notes that follow, so stay tuned.
So, the big question is this: how is it possible that you have a happier marriage when you feel like you've tried everything? Your spouse isn't making an effort. You're exhausted. You feel like giving up, or there's so much hurt that's taken place between you and your spouse. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen of the Happier Marriage world? I hope you're ready for another round of the Happier Marriage podcast. Today, as you've heard, we're discussing learn how to compromise with your spouse without losing yourself. Just to remind you that you can also watch video episodes of topics like this one on my YouTube channel. And if you go to KingsleyGrant.com/YouTube, KingsleyGrant.com/YouTube, you'll be able to go right there. And you can also see my long versions video and my short versions very short ones that are there with an idea or a thought. And when you go there, my friend, would you do me a favor? Do quick 3 things. Smash that subscribe button right away. As you go there, smash the subscribe button. I want to see you add your name to that list. It's growing. It's steadily growing. It's not where I want it yet, but I thank God for every single one of you who have clicked so far. I say thank you. I appreciate that. Now click on the like button and the notification bell so you won't miss any of the future broadcasts on the YouTube channel. And make sure you enjoy and the shorts that I have there. You can consume those in no time, and listen to the end. Hit the like button as well if you enjoy what you're listening to. Okay, I'm counting on you to do that. Okay, thank you for even planning to and saying to me, I will. I appreciate that. Okay, thank you so much. Again, let me simply say thanks for joining me on this episode. And as you've already heard, we're talking about the topic, learn how to compromise with your spouse without losing yourself. Now, I want to share with you 3 ways of how to do this. 3 ways that you may want to be able to practice this idea of compromising with your spouse while holding on to some things that are very important to you. You don't want to lose yourself. You don't want to lose your identity. You don't want to lose your convictions. You don't want to lose your core values. Those are important things, the non-negotiables. You want to hold on to those, right? But other things I believe is important to compromise, as you've heard earlier. So here's the first way I want you to begin to implement this idea, the art of compromising, is something you've heard from me, even if you listen to last episode 46, and you'll hear often because I believe it's a very important aspect of marriage and of communication. And that is practice active listening and empathy to understand your spouse's perspective. Now, it sounds easier than it actually is. And that's why the word practice means you practice and practice and practice, knowing that you may not start out getting it right at first, but eventually over time, practice becomes permanent. But you got to practice to get a permanent position where it becomes second nature. While you're practicing, here's what I want you to do. I want you to focus on your partner and seeking to understand. I think it was, I forgot who said, seek to understand than to be understood. And you may know who that says that right away. And let me just see here really quickly who I just kills me sometimes when I read something or remember something and can't remember who said it. Stephen Covey. There you go. I don't know why that didn't come to my mind, and I'm a fan of Stephen Covey. Stephen Covey said, learn how to understand or try to understand than to be understood, right? The true full quote says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. So when you're trying to seek to understand your spouse, you're going to lean in, give them your undivided attention, and you're going to acknowledge that you're listening. And if you listen to episode 46, I've talked more about it there, about what that may look like. And we shared Sarah and John's story about him being on the phone while she's talking. You want to go back and listen to that because I really covered quite a bit of grounds here, so I won't take much time here to go over that. But you want to make certain your partner knows you're listening to him or to her. Number 2, create a list of priorities and negotiate what's most important, right? Start with what's most important. Sometimes we get so many things moving at the same time. We're trying to tackle so many things on the same front, and we're having issues. So by determining what's most important to each of you, and then find a way to meet in the middle, and through negotiation, through the art of compromise, right? You're going to negotiate. For example, what's important to me and my family is spiritual, which I'm sure is probably to you as well, is really church attendance. I want to make certain at least once a week we attend church. Now, my kids are grown, they're adults, so I don't have control anymore over that. But when they were much smaller, we had to negotiate what would be the best way for us to all get to church. Now, I was very involved in church more than my wife and my kids were. I actually had a position at a church. And so we had to drive separately. Thank God we were blessed to have 2 different vehicles. And so we had to drive separately to church. So we had to negotiate what are the priorities. The priority is that we're going to go to church. That's a priority. And we got to figure out then, how can we make it happen? Knowing that we have different schedules, knowing what my involvement was and theirs were not, we had to figure out a way to make certain that this happened, because it was very important to us as a family. And so we had to decide, either if one of my children had something to go to do at church, I could take them down with me. I go earlier, or they can come later with my wife, because she wasn't as involved as I was in the church and church activities. So we had to figure that out, right? And there could be a number of other areas that I could cite as examples, but the key part is that you're going to decide what the priorities are. Create a list of priorities, and then negotiate what's most important, and then what might you guys need to do together to find a common ground, a middle ground through a negotiation. You're going to meet in the middle, that both parties will get something that you want. And remember, now it's about not a single person sport, it's a team sport. And that means you both can't have all that you want, but the relationship will get all that it needs, which is what the side I fall on in relationships. Now, the third way is to brainstorm creative solutions that both of you feel that your needs will be met, and you don't feel like you are giving up more ground than your spouse, which happens quite a bit. Feel like, well, why do I have to give up so much, and he or she doesn't give up as much? So one of those ways to brainstorm creative solutions is to kind of think outside of the box, right? Come up with unique solutions, right, that may not be immediately or readily recognized or are seen as a solution. You may have to think about it, pray about it, reflect about it, and come back together if you need to be. But you want to brainstorm creative solutions to be able, for example, if my wife and I shared one vehicle, then how could we do this? Well, there was a time we shared one vehicle. And so we had to work out our schedule where one of us had to drop the other person off someplace and come back home and take care of the kids, or vice versa, something like that. Now, was it ideal? No. Was it some sacrifice? Yes. But we had to think outside of the box of how could we make this happen. And I remember sometimes we had to decide, okay, we had a family friend whose kids were going to school, the same school we were going to, our kids were going to. And so we had to kind of negotiate, how do we then either work out something where they drop our kids off to school along with theirs, and we would pick up their kids and ours from school. Again, we had to think about what's possible and not try to throw it out right away. If an idea is mentioned, put it down. And I won't get into this whole idea of negotiation and how that may look, but you want to find solutions that may be outside of the box, right? Okay, now let's get back to Sarah and John's story. After I've shared these 3 things with you, number 1 was practice active listening and empathy, right? To understand your partner's perspective. Number 2, creating a list of priorities and negotiate what's most important. And number 3, brainstorm creative solutions that meet both spouses' needs. All right. Now, with that said, returning to Sarah and John's story. Remember now, the issue was over money, spending. Sarah was a saver. John was a spender. The question we had on the table, and I'd love to hear how you answered. You can always, DM me or post a comment where you see this on social media, or send me an email. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, what it is your answers were to these 3 questions. The first question was, is John correct that this is a control issue? That Sarah was trying to control and restrict him, and that's why he objected to her idea of creating a budget. Second question was, what beliefs were at play? What beliefs do you see at play with Sarah and John? And the third question was, how could John and Sarah solve this problem, right? How could Sarah, actually the third question really read, how could John and Sarah solve this problem? How could they do that? Okay, so let's then go to the give you some ideas of what my thoughts on this is, right? Or my thoughts on this are. First thing, is John correct that this is a control issue? Well, now we don't have all the data or the information to make a judgment call like this. Now, John is the one that decides that he felt that Sarah, and again, this is just one story or a case study. We don't know the relationship. Let's take it that the relationship is great and they only have this one issue. Now, John projected onto the story or to Sarah that she wants to restrict him and control him. But is that what Sarah really wants? What is it that John's missing? John's missing that Sarah truly wants what's best for the family, the team. And she wants to invite him to think likewise, not just about what he wants. See, he's concerned about what he wants to do, and so he saw it as restrictive and controlling. But he misses the point that Sarah wanted him to see big picture. John, come on. She wants you to see that the family and the future is what she's after. The question is, how do we get there? Now, so Sarah brought in the idea of a budget. Well, what she could say to John is, John, here's what I'm thinking. For us to be able to, whatever picture she has in her mind, she needs to kind of paint that picture for John. He may not even have that picture in his mind, and say, for us to get here, here's one thing I'm thinking. Or she could say, how do you think we can get there? Or she could say, here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking one thing, we could budget. Are there other things you might bring to the table? And they could then start brainstorming, right? And so it's not that she decides what happens, because John could feel that way. And maybe he might see a pattern where Sarah had been coming up with these ideas, not just as suggestion, but as what needs to happen, right? So it's not about being correct or incorrect, but I could see how John could see it as a restrictive and controlling issue, because he may not have a chance to have had a part to play in what the ideas were to solve their problems. Okay. Now, the second question was, what beliefs are at play? Well, the beliefs are very, very clear that John believes that Sarah is rigid, is inflexible, and because she's rigid and inflexible, it comes across as controlling for him and restrictive. So that's his belief from which he's operating from. So he sees Sarah, every time he sees her, the filter, the lens through which he sees her is that you are controlling and restrictive and very rigid. And so he only sees that because he's going to see more of that in her to confirm his biased thinking. Sarah's belief is that John doesn't care about their financial future. But is that really true? Can she use this one idea because he spends quite a bit that he doesn't control, he doesn't care? I think it's a far stretch. So what happened is she superimposing on him this idea, and she believes that about him. So whenever she sees him spending, she's thinking that here he goes. He's very irresponsible, very reckless, and truly doesn't care about our financial future. And if you ask John, he would probably adamantly says, of course I care. Why do you think I keep working so hard and these long hours and put in all this time? Of course I care. And they would get in this argument unnecessarily. But see how beliefs shapes our behavior? And the third question is, how could John and Sarah solve this problem? Well, I kind of gave an idea earlier. They could sit down and say, here's what's happening. How could we, as a team, how could we get to whatever outcome and results that they have in mind? And then they both could brainstorm ideas of how to get there. Now, I find that when couples are having a hard time, sitting down and discussing matters like this, because they don't have a routine. They're falling out of how to do this. So it becomes very foreign to them that they're now going to have a conversation about money when they haven't been having these conversations about other issues as well. And it may not be their fault. It may not be that they don't want to. They probably want to speak about other issues, the parenting issues, in-laws, other family issues, but they just don't know how to bring those things up. I see it so often in couples. I see them not being able to talk about some issues. And when they come to a session, they just kind of vomit all over each other. Not literally, of course, but, because they're just filled and they're just having no place to go, but they want to talk. It's amazing to see how many couples will say, one partner, oh, he doesn't talk, she doesn't talk. And in session, they can't be stopped. You can't keep them quiet because they have so much to talk about. So what I find is that couples who are in this game and been practicing communication over time have a better chance of being able to do this. And because I've seen it so many times and heard these things so many times, what I have found is I decided one day, what if couples had a way to have these conversations about other topics in a very non-conflictual way, in a very fun and kind of memorable, fun and meaningful ways? What if they were able to talk about things like vacation and in-laws and love and romance and sex and money and all of that in a more fun and meaningful way? Would that be helpful? And I found that it would be, because I see that happening in my sessions. So what I did, I created what's a deck of cards, right? It's a tool, Connect Strong conversational cards for couples. And so what it is filled with prompts, questions and prompts to those questions. So one question on each card and 4 prompts. So allows you to start a conversation in a very fun and meaningful way. And it forces individual, because the rules of the game or of the card use, right, to optimal use, is you must listen. You must learn how to listen. And the PDF that accompanies this card tells you how to do that. And so you can have real conversation in fun and meaningful ways that leads to deeper intimacy, deeper connection with your partner. And so if this interests you to get into the habit of working on the muscle of communication, to talk about issues like Sarah and John, then I want to encourage you to get your own deck of cards. And to get that, you go to kingsleygrant.com/cards, kingsleygrant.com/cards, and get yours today. Here's the thing. You can save $10 now because the cards are going to be eventually on Amazon and they'll be a full price. And that $10 will no longer be there. So if you're listening to this episode and you say, Kingsley, I went there and the $10 is no longer available because that time is no longer, it's past. And I'm sorry about that. But if you go there and you're able to, go to kingsleygrant.com/cards, you will see how to save. By putting in the code, you'll save $10 for now. And I want to encourage you to hurry over there and get your deck right away. Now, to summarize what we talked about today on the topic of the topic of learn how to compromise with your spouse without losing yourself. Here I mentioned the 3 things I said you need to do. Number 1, practice active listening. Number 1, I want to make sure I have it in the same order. Practice active listening and empathy to understand, right, your spouse's perspective. Number 2, create a list of priorities and negotiate what's most important. And number 3, brainstorm creative solutions that meet both of your needs. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything we covered today from the start of the show to this point. You can send me an email or DM me on Instagram or Facebook and let me know what your thoughts were about the show. And make sure that you leave me a review. And I'll tell you how to do that right now, how to quickly do a review. So, and you also want to wait until the announcer would give you how to get a free gift and how to stay in contact with us. But on your phone, you can go to Apple Podcasts, right? Go to Apple Podcasts, search for the podcast Happier Marriage. When that comes up, you navigate to the podcast on the podcast app, which I just mentioned, and then click on the image. Click on the image. So you click on the image and scroll all the way down, scroll down, and boom, you're going to see ratings and reviews. Click the 5 stars. I'm just saying that, but you can click how many stars you want to. But you see the 5 stars, you can click there and then leave a review. That's it. It's as simple as that. Now, thanks again for listening. And the announcer will tell you how to get your free gift for staying up until this time, which I really, really appreciate so very much. Now let's make marriages happier again. God bless.
We've come to the end of another exciting show, and if you enjoyed this podcast, 1. Make sure you give this show a rating and review. 2. Subscribe to the show to get all new releases. And 3. Get your complimentary copy of the 5 Secrets to a Happier Marriage ebook at kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. Again, it's kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. See the link in the show notes. Do it today. Don't delay. Thanks so much for listening, and make sure you tell one other spouse about this show, or better yet, share it with them. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May he turn his face toward you and give you his peace, both now and forever.